A jury in Virginia will resume deliberations tomorrow on whether to find former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort guilty of tax evasion and bank fraud. Manafort's trial wrapped up on Wednesday. For nearly 2 weeks, the prosecution laid out a paper trail alleging Manafort received tens of millions from Russian-backed politicians in Ukraine, and that he hid the money from tax officials. They also detailed his lavish lifestyle, millions spent on high-end clothing, real estate purchases, landscaping, and other big-ticket items. Manafort chose not to testify or call any witnesses in his defense. His lawyers have tried to put the blame on his former business partner. We are tracking reports this morning that White House counsel Don McGahn is cooperating with the Mueller investigation into Russian election meddling. The New York Times is reporting that McGahn's participation was voluntary, but President Trump is saying otherwise on Twitter. This morning he tweeted, "I allowed him," meaning McGahn, "and all others to testify. I didn't have to." Trump has also said the White House has handed over 1 million pages of documents to the special counsel. For a closer look at this, we're joined now by Alex Whiting. He's a former federal prosecutor and now professor of criminal law at Harvard University. He joins me from Newton, Massachusetts. So, sir, thank you so much for making time for us today. So much to unpack there, but I want to actually begin with the New York Times report regarding Donald McGahn, the White House's top lawyer, who has reportedly helped with or cooperated with the Mueller investigation. We should make clear that CBC News has not independently verified the reporting that New York Times is putting forward. But if this is true, and McGahn did cooperate and has given some evidence to the investigation, how important would his involvement be?
It would be very important. He was there for everything. So on the particularly on the obstruction part of the investigation, he saw a lot. He could provide information, and apparently has provided information about what the president was thinking when he took steps to intervene with Comey to get favorable treatment for Mike Flynn, when he fired Comey, when he pressured Sessions to back off the investigation. All of those things, McGahn gives the inside look, and that is what an investigation is looking for. So it really is, if true, it's a remarkable win for the Mueller investigation in trying to unpack whether there was obstruction of justice by the president.
Now, according again to the New York Times' report, part of the reason McGahn cooperated was because he was worried that President Trump was setting him up to take the blame for any possible illegal acts of obstruction. And of course, as we've mentioned, I imagine you've heard it and seen it. Donald Trump has tweeted responding to that, calling it, the New York Times reporting, a fake news piece, implying that because the White House counsel, Don McGahn, was giving hours of testimony to the special counsel, he must be a John Dean type rat. But I allowed him and all the others to testify, and I didn't have to. I have nothing to hide. So, sir, try and make sense of this for us.
Well, I think there are two things that this event shows. The first thing is it demonstrates the incoherence of Trump's strategy. For months and even years, he's gone back and forth between trying to block the inquiry, trying to obstruct it, and trying to cooperate. And it's true, he did waive any executive privilege or any attorney-client privilege to allow McGahn to talk to the investigators on the advice of lawyers who were telling him to cooperate with the investigation. But he veered between these different strategies, and it was a kind of incoherent approach. And the second thing is, I think this shows the problem of a lack of loyalty and kind of teamwork within his administration. There are people are turning against each other, and it's no surprise that McGahn was worried that he would be the next one to be fired or blamed, as many others have been. So I think that we're seeing those two things show. We're seeing the fruits of Trump's strategy, both in terms of his legal approach and in terms of how he deals with members of his administration.
Okay, let's return to the other story that we've been following in connection with this, which is, of course, the Paul Manafort trial. Now, the jury has not been sequestered. They are looking over the allegations and now the charges of tax evasion and bank fraud. But because they're not sequestered and they're out this weekend, and President Trump is repeatedly referring to Manafort as a good guy and a good person, how difficult does that make the position of the jury as they move forward with their decision-making?
Well, I have to say, I think it's shocking that the jury was not sequestered in this case, particularly since the president has been making comments about the case from the very beginning of the trial 2 weeks ago. And there is a tremendous risk of that the jury will be influenced by these comments, that it will gain knowledge of them and feel pressured by them. And this is a case where clearly the jury should have been sequestered and protected from that kind of interference. We'll see what happens. They've only been deliberating for 2 days. The evidence is very strong against Manafort. I think the jury is probably focusing in on whether he intended to commit the crimes. That's probably their main focus of inquiry, but we'll no doubt get a verdict in the next days.